Emile stole my dead husband's credit cards and racked up $100,000. So, I sent her to jail without hesitation. I'm 28. My life was turned upside down when I discovered the unthinkable. My mother-in-law, Veronica, had stolen my late husband's wallet after his funeral, and in the weeks that followed, she racked up over $100,000 in credit card debt using it. To say I was devastated would be an understatement. The betrayal cut deep, especially coming so soon after losing the love of my life. How could she do this to us? I whispered to myself one evening, staring at the mounting credit card statements spread across our kitchen table. My hands trembled as I sorted through the evidence of her betrayal. At first, I didn't know what to do. I was already grieving my husband's death, trying to hold myself together for the sake of our children and my own mental health. But Veronica's betrayal made me realize I couldn't keep letting her take advantage of me or my family. Let me start at the beginning. My husband and I, both in our early 30s, had been together for 7 wonderful years. We married 2 years after graduation, and I thought we had everything going for us: a beautiful home, stable jobs, and dreams of growing old together. Then, our world came crashing down with 4 devastating words. The cancer is terminal. I remember gripping his hand in the doctor's office, both of us frozen in disbelief. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The doctor's face was sympathetic but firm. I'm so sorry. Given the aggressive nature and stage of the cancer, we're looking at less than a year. One minute we were making plans for the future, and the next, those plans were turning to dust. The shock was overwhelming, and the next few months became a blur of doctor visits, hospital stays, and heartbreaking moments. My husband fought hard, showing incredible strength until the very end. "Promise me you'll take care of yourself," he said one night, his voice weak, but his eyes still full of love. "Promise me you won't let my mom give you too much trouble." I tried to shush him, to tell him everything would be fine, but he insisted. "I know how she can be. Just stand up for yourself, okay?" He passed away in his sleep just days after his 34th birthday. I was devastated. My heart shattered into pieces. I wasn't sure I could ever gather up again. During the wake and funeral, I tried to maintain composure for our children and families. Our friends rallied around us, bringing food, offering support, helping with the kids. But one person was conspicuously absent: Veronica. Our relationship had always been strained. From the beginning, she made it clear she thought her son could do better. I remember one of our first meetings when she looked me up and down and said, "Well, I suppose you'll do for now." Over the years, her passive-aggressive comments became a constant backdrop to family gatherings. "Oh, you're still working? I always thought a wife should be home with her family. That's what you're wearing to Christmas dinner? How interesting." I tried to keep the peace for my husband's sake, but after his diagnosis, Veronica became increasingly distant. It was as if she couldn't handle the reality of what was happening, or perhaps she was already plotting what would come next. The first sign something was wrong came when I was sorting through my husband's belongings. His wallet was missing from his dresser drawer where he always kept it. I called Veronica, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Veronica? Hi. I'm just wondering if you happened to take John's wallet after the funeral? I can't seem to find it." "Oh." Her voice was artificially light. "No, I haven't seen it. Maybe you misplaced it. You've been so scattered lately." Then the credit card statements started arriving. The first envelope seemed innocent enough, just another bill among the mountain of paperwork that follows a death. But when I opened it, my whole body went cold. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered, scanning the pages with increasing horror. $15,000 at Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, and various luxury boutiques. I recognized the dates immediately, all within days of the funeral. I called the credit card company, my hands shaking as I dialed. "Hello, I'm calling about some suspicious charges on my late husband's account." The representative's voice was sympathetic but firm. "Yes, ma'am. The charges were made in person, with a physical card and proper ID verification. The second statement arrived 3 days later, $22,000 at the Ritz-Carlton, Le Bernardin, and other high-end establishments. I spread the receipts across our dining room table, creating a timeline of Veronica's betrayal. While I was planning my husband's funeral, she had been enjoying champagne dinners. While I was explaining death to our children, she was shopping for designer handbags. The third statement was the worst, $63,000 in jewelry and designer goods. Each receipt felt like a physical blow. I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by papers, sobbing uncontrollably. My best friend found me there when she came to drop off dinner. "Oh my God, what happened?" she asked, rushing to my side. Through tears, I showed her the statements. "Veronica, she took his wallet. She's been spending like crazy." Her face hardened as she looked through the charges. "That evil witch," she whispered. "You need to call the police." "But she's family," I protested weakly, echoing the excuse I'd made for years. She grabbed my shoulders. "No. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't steal from a dead man while his wife and children are grieving. This is criminal, and you need to treat it that way." I didn't confront her immediately. I was still in shock, still trying to process this new betrayal on top of my overwhelming loss. But then came the call from our insurance company. "Mrs. Thompson? I'm calling to verify some information. We've had several calls from someone claiming to be your husband's mother, insisting she's the beneficiary of his life insurance policy." That was the final straw. I sat down that evening and made a decision. My husband's last words to me echoed in my mind. "Stand up for yourself." I called the police and reported everything. When I finally confronted Veronica, her response left me cold. She laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're overreacting. I was just helping myself to what was mine. He wouldn't have cared. What was yours?" I felt my voice rising. "He was your son, not your personal ATM." "Please," she scoffed. "I gave him life. Everything he had was because of me. And now that he's gone, I deserve to be taken care of." "Taken care of? While your grandchildren and I struggle to rebuild our lives. While we're grieving." She waved her hand dismissively. "You're young, you'll figure it out. Besides, you were never good enough for him anyway." The police investigation began slowly, but gained momentum as the evidence mounted. The detective took special interest in the case, her face growing darker with each new detail. "Mrs., she said during one of our meetings, "I've seen a lot of fraud cases, but this is something else. To steal from your own son's grieving family." The investigation revealed even more than I'd initially discovered. Not only had Veronica maxed out my husband's credit cards, but she'd also attempted to access his retirement accounts and had been calling various banks claiming to be his next of kin. The district attorney decided to pursue maximum charges. "We're looking at multiple counts of fraud, theft, and identity theft," she explained during our first meeting. "Given the amount stolen and the circumstances, we're pushing for jail time." Veronica hired an expensive attorney, of course, probably using my husband's stolen money to pay for it. The preliminary hearing was a nightmare. I had to sit there and listen as her lawyer tried to paint her as a grieving mother who had simply made some poor choices in her emotional state. My client was devastated by the loss of her only son. The lawyer argued smoothly. Any unusual spending was simply her way of coping with unimaginable grief. I nearly laughed out loud at that. The prosecutor's response was perfect. Grief doesn't explain carefully planned identity theft and fraud. She didn't just make a few emotional purchases. She systematically stole over $100,000 while her grandchildren were still crying over their father's death. The trial itself lasted 2 weeks. Every day, I had to walk past Veronica in the courthouse hallway, watching as she played the role of poor, misunderstood grandmother for anyone who would listen. She'd even started dressing differently, trading her usual designer clothes for modest, conservative outfits that made her look more sympathetic. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," she would tell anyone within earshot. "My daughter-in-law is just angry and looking for someone to blame for her loss." But the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage from the stores, the credit card receipts, the documented phone calls to banks and insurance companies. It all painted a clear picture of calculated theft, not grief-stricken impulse spending. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. When the judge announced the sentence, 3 years in prison plus full restitution, Veronica finally lost her composed facade. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, turning to point at me. "This is your fault. You've ruined everything. I'm his mother. I had every right." As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still screaming about her rights as a mother. The bailiff had to physically restrain her when she tried to charge at me one last time. The legal process didn't end there. Even after the criminal case, there were civil proceedings to deal with, recovering the stolen money, handling the credit card companies, untangling the mess she'd made of my husband's accounts. Each day brought new challenges, new paperwork, new reminders of her betrayal. My lawyer helped me navigate the aftermath. "It's going to take time," he warned me, "but we'll get through this. You're doing the right thing, protecting your family's future." One evening, as I tucked my youngest into bed, she asked, "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma come visit anymore?" I stroked her hair, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people make choices that hurt the ones they're supposed to love. When that happens, we have to protect ourselves, even if it means letting them go." It hasn't been easy. There are still days when the weight of everything, losing my husband, Veronica's betrayal, raising children alone, feels overwhelming. But I'm stronger now. I've learned to stand up for myself and my family, just as my husband asked me to. Looking back, I realized that what Veronica did was more than just theft. It was a violation of trust, of family bonds, of basic human decency. While I'm still grieving the loss of my husband, I'm also grieving the loss of what family should be. But I won't let toxic people keep taking from me, not anymore. My life is far from perfect, but I'm rebuilding it piece by piece. I keep a photo of my husband on our bedside table, and sometimes, in quiet moments, I swear I can hear his voice. "You're doing great, honey. Stay strong." And I am staying strong, for myself, for our children, and for the love we shared. As for Veronica, she's no longer part of our story. Sometimes the hardest part of standing up for yourself is knowing when to walk away, and I've finally found the strength to do just that.